Hello, my name is Fritz KO, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Fritz KO Vids. If you like this video, here's what you can do to help spread the message. Like it and share it on YouTube, Facebook, and other social media. Show this video to your friends and family. Connect with me, Fritz KO, on Facebook and help start an information revolution. And again, as always, thank you for watching.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
I think the people watching tonight should look at the people protesting and look at what color hat they're wearing. It's certainly not red.
But as you can see, she was wearing red. As we continued the interview, Kiara Robles paid for it.
Are you surprised, ma'am?
In a free country, with free speech, in this iconic place, no matter what a person's politics, that happened.
Ma'am, are you all right?
You, sir, please. I'm just here to protest. Please! Stand down! Get out! Get back!
We are all willing to call you whatever gender and identity we want.
Are you trans?
You guys
Are you
believe that
experiencing oppression? Don't smile at me, bitch. What you want?
Yeah, they did grab me and pull me in and try to punch me. They're the person right over there with the black lipstick.
That's assault right there. Officer, I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything that happened.
there's no reason to be
I didn't see anything. Nothing happened.
Liberals must examine all the reasons why we keep losing elections. Starting with Democrats have gone from the party that protects people to the party that protects feelings. From ask not what your country can do for you to you owe me an apology. You know, in 2016, conservatives won the White House, both houses of Congress, and almost 2/3 of governorships and state legislatures. Whereas liberals, on the other hand, caught Steve Martin calling Carrie Fisher beautiful in a tweet and made him take it down. I'm not making that up. That really happened. Here's Steve's offensive tweet. When I was a young man, Carrie Fisher was the most beautiful creature I'd ever seen. She turned out to be witty and bright as well. How could you, Steve? You know that whole controversy about the name Washington Redskins? They did a survey. 9 out of 10 actual Indians don't give a shit. Here's Hillary Duff last year. Ah! And then, of course, her tweet, I'm so sorry to people I offended. It was not properly thought through, and I am truly from the bottom of my heart sorry. Chris Hemsworth was even more beside himself with self-loathing after he attended a Lone Ranger-themed party dressed as an Indian. He wrote, I was stupidly unaware of the offense. I sincerely and unreservedly apologize to all First Nations people for this thoughtless action. Last year, Justin Timberlake tweeted that an African-American, Jesse Williams, inspired him, and again had to apologize for the sin of giving someone a compliment. I apologize to anyone that felt that was out of turn. I have nothing but love for all of you and all of us. Oh, good, because life knows no sin greater than the one he was accused of doing, which was cultural appropriation. At the Golden Globes this month, Michael Keaton mixed up the titles of 2 movies that had a black cast, Hidden Figures and Fences, and said Hidden Fences because he's a Klansman. What matters is that while liberals were in a contest to see who could be the first to call out fat shaming, the Tea Party has been busy taking over school boards. Stop protecting your virgin ears and start noticing you're getting fucked in the ass. Okay.
Greg began observing this weird stuff happening in universities in 2014. It all starts in 2014. Most of your listeners have heard about safe spaces, microaggressions, bias response teams, trigger warnings, all that stuff. That stuff didn't exist before 2014. It just begins creeping in then, and then it kind of blows up in 2015. And so our whole book is an exploration of why. Why did this happen? And so to your question about was there an event, our answer is there are 6 different causal threads. There's like all these social trends, some going back to the 80s and 90s, that came together around 2014 so that students are a little different, and then there are certain forces acting on them that are different. And so you get this weird new game. You get this explosive mix. You get some students who are actually very drawn to grievance studies. And so very briefly, it's things like rising political polarization. So left and right never particularly liked each other. But in the 70s and 80s, if you look at surveys done of how much you hate people on the other side, it's not that intense. It begins going up in the 80s, and then especially after 2000, it's going up very steeply. At the same time, university faculty, who've always leaned left throughout the 20th century, but it was only a lean. And in the 90s, it begins shifting much further left, so that now faculties, especially in the social sciences and humanities, are pretty purified. They're overwhelmingly on the left. So you have a more left-leaning university at a time when left-right hostility is getting more and more intense. And so any question that has a political valence, now there's a lot more people who want to do the football game. Not the truth-seeking game, but that we got to defeat the other side. Don't give me nuance. Don't give me data. We know what we believe, and damn it, we're going to, So you got this changing political situation. And then you've got a couple of threads about what we've done to kids. So, and God, this is a whole nother area of conversation for us, but we basically took away free play and gave them social media. The same, basically kids who were born in 1995 and after, Gen Z, they had really different childhoods, and they're not as prepared for conflict and college.
Countries, in countries where 50 years ago they just cook everything over a fire, people no longer have to stand over inhaling fumes, and they can now just turn on an electric stove.
Yeah, but in those
that's good. That's good for the environment too, because you're not burning as much.
No, it's not, dude.
Yes,
no,
it
it's
is.
not.
That's why air quality is improving.
Air quality isn't fucking improving!
We'll get into that later. But you put all these things together, you get kids who are much more anxious and fragile, much more depressed, coming onto campus at a time of much greater political activism. And now these grievance studies ideas about America's a matrix of oppression and look at the world in terms of good versus evil, it's more appealing to them. And it's that minority of students, they're the ones who are initiating a lot of the movements.
Hey, Dave, we don't have to give a speech. Need to go, boy. Hey, David, be nice. Come here now.
Stop our street! Stop our street!
You, sir, please. I'm just here to protest. Please, stand down. Get out. Get back.
Flarka helped organize the Berkeley protests, and she says activists ought to copy its tactics for other speakers and events around the country. Yvette Flarka is with us now. Yvette, thanks all for joining us. So you did a bunch of interviews after, and you were asked about this, and you were, to your credit, I think, very straightforward about it and unapologetic, and you said, yeah, this guy was a fascist, Milo's a fascist, and we shut him down. You didn't pretend otherwise. We shut him down, and that's what you do with fascists. I think I'm characterizing what you said correctly. Just so we can understand the standard here, what is a fascist?
So a fascist is someone who's organizing a mass movement that's attacking women, immigrants, black people, other minority groups in a movement of genocide. That's what a fascist is.
I accept responsibility for my own actions, and you can throw out names like Gamergate, which your viewers are not going to understand, but the reality is I took the side of what I consider to be, consumers over the establishment. The consumers, actual video gamers who were worried about their art form being poisoned by social justice, just like social justice has ruined comic books, ruined Hollywood, ruined the Academy, ruined journalism, and everybody agrees with it. 65% of people in America America think the press routinely makes stuff up. Why? Politics, the left. And we didn't want that same thing to happen to video games, so we resisted it. And for our trouble, we were called all manner of terrible things and accused of things we did not do.
Because you trolled women, that's why.
All kinds of things get through. Did I troll women?
Can I just ask a question?
You seem to be accusing me of things that I never did. I'm responsible for what I do. I'm much more interested, by the way, in your question about Daddy and about Daddy Donald Trump. I called him that because I think it sort of annoys everybody, but also because it reflected the role that Donald Trump was playing in culture and in society at the time. He was one of those people that kind of slightly made you cringe sometimes, made you a little embarrassed sometimes, but was basically right, basically had your interests at heart. And if you stuck by him, you knew he was going to look after you in the end.
You're a middle school teacher, which may surprise some of our students, or rather some of our viewers, that you have students. The First Amendment was always kind of the cornerstone of American civic life, the idea that you have the right to say something that other people may vehemently disagree with, but you have that right. It's enshrined in the Bill of Rights. Do you teach that to your students?
The First Amendment is about free speech, but that's not an abstraction. And if there was someone in my classroom who was espousing rape or genocide or attacks on Muslims, I would certainly make sure that I stood up for the rest of my students and told them they need to stop. And if they refused to, they would need to leave.
Would you hit them?
In fact, fascism isn't just about abstract. No, I'm not finished though yet. And I'm not finished yet. If there is a fascist in any situation that I was in, I would call for other people to take action too, but it's not just about the immediate moment.
Right,
it's also within the context of building a movement.
But I don't want this to be abstract.
Against Donald Trump
You're getting abstract.
And against fascism.
I want to bring this back to the concrete, as you said, and rightly so. So if there was a student in your class who started espousing what you believe is fascism, and you said you need to leave, you need to be quiet, you need to leave, and he didn't leave, would you hit him as you hit that protester? Would you beat him up?
No, of course not. But that's not. If there is a fascist in any situation that I was in, I would call for other people to take action too, but it's...
We don't give a speech.
Here you go, boy.
Hey, say we should be nice. Be nice. Come here now.
Stop our street. Stop our street.
Sir, please. We're here to protest. Please.
So if there was a student in your class who started espousing what you believe is fascism, and you said you need to leave, you need to be quiet, you need to leave, and he didn't leave, would you hit him as you hit that protester? Would you beat him up?
No, of course not. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who, you know what, in Sacramento, there were fascists who had knives tied at the ends of sticks, and they stabbed people, including
Not the man that you hit. He looked kind of unarmed to me.
Oh, yes, actually they did. And it's funny to you, but it's actually not funny to the rest of us. And that's why we take this really seriously.
I know that you take it seriously, and that's why I'm asking you a really simple question.
But I am serious as a heart. I am serious as a heartbeat.
I believe you. I believe that you're serious.
And we're not talking about a classroom. We're talking about people who are trying to kill and murder people and who've already done it. And who are trying to create a hostile environment on these campuses in order to do that. No, that's not a safe environment for immigrant students. That's not a safe environment for women or Muslim students or trans students. And so, yeah, we have a right to defend ourselves and real free speech.
Let's get one last question, if I may. So if you're standing, I just want to know, like, the protocol for anti-fascist activists like yourself. You're standing on a street corner, someone starts saying something you don't like, and you think, boy, that's an act of hostility, that person's a fascist.
No, but you are misrepresenting the words that I've been saying. This isn't about not liking something. This isn't about Ben and Jerry's versus Stone Cold Pizza or something. This is about the lives of real people, immigrants who are under attack now, Muslims who are being massacred,
and I'm
women who are being raped.
How deep is your commitment?
So you're the one trivializing this, not me.
I'm not in any way trivializing, and I ask you a sincere question. To what extent would you go to stop that person from spreading genocidal propaganda?
I would call for people to counter-protest, to stand up, and to shut down any
But what do you mean by shut down?
Recruit and organize.
Like, what if I want to keep talking? I'm saying something that you find appalling, but you know what? I've got a First Amendment right. I'm an American. What would you do? So a bunch of people come and say, stop that. I say, no, I'm not going to stop that. I'm an American. What are you going to do next?
You know, the First Amendment, you want to talk about the First Amendment? Coretta Scott King's letter wasn't allowed to be read on the floor of the Senate last week under the Constitution in the Senate.
That's exactly what happened.
And yet, at the same time, you're the one then who's actually trying to defend someone like a fascist speaking and recruiting at a college campus.
All right, Yvette,
I'm
we're
proud
out of
to say
time.
that we all
I don't
stood
want
up
to
and we
abridge
shut
your
him down.
speech rights. All right, thanks for coming on.
Oh, boy! Hey, Sammy, be nice. Be nice. Come here now.
Stop our street! Stop our street!
You, sir, please. I'm just here to protest. Please, stand down.
And I've always said, this kind of stuff is not free speech when you're trying to censor somebody else's free speech. And then the right does it. And shockingly, there are members of the right, mainstream members of the right, who says, well, you know, this is just turnabout as fair play. Well, no, if it's wrong when the left does it, it's wrong when you do it. And this idiotic notion that trying to promote snowflakery from the right is somehow going to combat the snowflakery from the left, it's so stupid, especially because this stuff hasn't actually helped the left. I mean, even Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren came out against Antifa and people trying to shut down Ann Coulter at Berkeley. If the right starts to embrace the same tactics that some members of the left have embraced in shutting down free speech in the name of shutting down hate speech, then the right is going to be just as guilty as the left in this political impasse we now find ourselves in.
We have to warn people about microaggressions. Everybody has to be very careful of microaggressions because you wouldn't want to be microaggressed. And it's not even that I intend to offend you. It's that if you are offended subjectively, then I have microaggressed you. And that, by the way, allows you to do things like call out the cops, right? If I microaggress you, then you are allowed to do violent things in response.
Smile at me, bitch. What you want? Please, stand down. Get out. Get back.
And once you've gotten rid of the trigger warnings and the microaggressions, then finally you have your pathetic safe spaces for all of you snowflakes who can't deal with the real world and are convinced that the real world is going to conform to your standards of what it ought to be, that the real world is constructed just for you. Let me tell you a secret. In the real world, no one pays you to believe in the power of your dreams. In the real world, nobody cares about your internal feelings. In the real world, all people care about is whether you do good things or bad things. But the safe spaces you construct suggest that you are allowed to ban people who think differently than you in order to achieve a better outcome for yourself. It is the essence of fascism. And all this, of course, makes kids nuts. It makes kids nuts. It makes administrators nuts, clearly. Right? You're being made insane. If you're taught that you're a victim, that you're always a victim, or alternatively, that you're a victimizer, if you're taught that over and over and over again until it never stops, eventually you're going to go out and realize that you get benefit for being a victim. The more you claim victimhood, the better off you are. And this is what the left has done. They've created an entire society of the victim mentality where they say your own work, your own labor, the things you do, they make no difference in life. All that matters is you claim you're a victim, and we give you extra credit.
To begin with this shocking case out of L.A., and two friends of mine have told me about this. A police officer now has contracted that really rare and life-threatening illness, disease, typhoid fever. Now, what is it, fewer than 350 Americans contract this every year? So what's going on here?
We have complete breakdown of the basic needs of civilization in Los Angeles right now. We have the three prongs of airborne disease. Tuberculosis is exploding. Rodent-borne, we are one of the only major cities in the country that does not have a rodent control program, and sanitation is broken down. We had a typhus outbreak last summer. We will have a typhus outbreak this summer. I'm hearing from experts that bubonic plague is likely. It's already here. It will get onto the rat fleas. And then now...
Just imagine that, folks. In L.A., when you ride around L.A. now, homeless people everywhere. They're taking dumps on the sidewalks. It's almost hard to walk on the sidewalk without being careful not to step into the number two. They're not just doing number one, they're doing number two, and they don't care that you see them doing it. And so diseases everywhere in L.A. And San Francisco, out of control. In our own country, and our government, the Democratic Party is allowing this to happen. They want this to happen. They are fighting against the president putting a wall up because they want this to happen. And then the American people are so nice about it. No rallies. They're so-called Me Too rallies. They're Black Lives Matter rallies, but no real rallies for the country. All fake rallies, lying rallies. No, Me Too. Nobody care about that. No Black Lives Matter. Nobody care about that. All made up lies. How about the real deal? We're losing our country. Diseases are coming back. Homeless people just live everywhere on the streets. It's shocking in L.A. now. and we just drive by and look at them. The LA Times has reported on the growing rodent and trash crisis. Rodent mean rats. Rats everywhere. Big rats, fat rats. They don't believe in dieting or working out. Here's that soundbite.
Which is typhoid fever, 3 cases, 1 confirmed, probably 3. This is unbelievable. I can't believe I live in a city where this is not third world, Laura. This is medieval. Third world countries are insulted if they are accused of being like this. No city on earth tolerates this. The entire population is at risk. And God forbid if measles, this is a population that's suboptimally immunized. If measles gets in, I just have an image of myself on my knees in the gutter attending to people, because this summer is likely to be a very profound problem.
And I don't understand why there isn't a large, major protest of all the citizens of this country. It's not going to get better. The Democrats are not going to change it. Those who have voted for the Democrats, they are liars. They just care about power. If you doubt me, look at the black community. Black people have been voting, unfortunately, for black people for the last 50, 60 years or so, right? And their areas have only gotten worse. And now you have the white liberal Democrats and the media doing the same thing that the blacks have done. Now the country is getting worse. This is not a third world. This is medieval. That's what Dr. Drew remarks were all about. Homelessness is also exploding in San Francisco. The home district of this woman, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she's a Democrat, and here is a map of San Francisco showing every report of human feces in the last few years. Let's have it, Joel. There's the map of San Francisco. Wow, human feces in the last few years. This is coming to your town because the Democrats want sanctuary states and cities, and they don't want anybody cleaning up the mess. This city is covered with dump. That's where people have been dumping on the streets, Joel.
It's not surprising, and that almost looks like L.A.
It's coming to L.A., and when it leaves L.A., it's going all around the country, especially if you keep voting for the Democrats.
You know that less than 10% of rapes are actually reported.
Okay, where's that?
To the cops.
Where's that?
It's from all of the women's organizations. You can look it up online. You can find it through the socialized organizations that study rape. I participate with an organization that works as a rape crisis center. We base that on the number of calls. The police know, based on the unofficial reports, the third-party reporting, and the direct reports, this is not a secret that about 10% of rapes are reported.
So how do you know 10% of rapes are reported if the others aren't?
Because those people call the women's centers, they ask for help, they seek medical attention.
So they are reported.
But if you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no. My answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
Okay, but you're still saying these kids should not be accepted because they don't really fit in either place? They can't just
I'm saying that the Boy Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout. You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Where's that written, though? Okay.
In the name Boy Scouts.
You talk about law school, and I think it's interesting to note because I think we're both feminists.
I never considered myself a feminist. All during my professional career, whether it be a lawyer or a judge, I never belonged to a woman's organization. I didn't want to be, I wasn't a woman lawyer. I was a lawyer who happened to be a woman. And I wasn't a woman judge. I was a judge who happened to be a woman. I actually never felt, probably I was too stupid to know that I was held back at any time because of my gender. And I still don't feel as if there was any time in my life when I thought that being a woman held me back. You define yourself. If you let other people define you, that's a mistake. So I never felt the need to have a feminine organization behind me, although
you're simplifying the issues that were on the plate of the nation at that point. I mean, we were looking at reverting a depression at that point. Everyone, the Fed chairman.
I disagree that we were going into a depression, but go ahead.
Do you have a degree in economics?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Highest honor.
Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
Why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay. Which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh. Oh. Why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man.
Time to listen up, you silly liberal fruitcakes. I came out here, I wanted to tell some jokes. Let's do some reality checks here. Do you have any idea, sir, how pathetic it must be to be you? These people wanted to come out and have a good time, hear a few jokes, some thoughtful discussion, but your head pops off the pillow in the morning with, oh, how can I be a professional victim today? Let me go in and screw with their act just because, oh my God, your parents didn't tell you that your opinion wasn't worth that much. Look, they're confused. They're confused. You know why? Because I'm not your gender studies professor who has to cater to your trigger warning, microaggression, safe space bullshit. I didn't want to do this. I wanted to come out and tell a few jokes. You created this monster. We have to go. 10 more minutes of this. Let this reverberate. Let it be a life lesson. This monster right here that you're so afraid of, the face you see in your nightmares, was created by social justice warrior assholes like you.
I have two comments to make. First, I want to direct this to Miss Skinny Minnie.
Which Miss Skinny Minnie?
Isn't her name Mimi or Skinny Minnie?
Yeah, okay, Mimi.
Well, the skinniest girl up there. Anyways, she made a comment that you have to have a lot of willingness and motivation to be skinny.
I was quoting Dr. Kelly Brownell of Yale. That's what he says.
I don't care who you was quoting. You said it, own it.
I agree with him, absolutely.
Okay, good. But I'm a plus-size model. I am willing and motivated to wake up every day to keep these curves. I don't want to wake up and look like you and be confused and quoting everybody. Why don't you say what you have to say and stand up for what you believe?
Oh, I was just tagging on to she was talking about the same Yale Center, so.
Okay, but let me ask you a question while you're standing up. Why is it okay for you to call her Skinny Minnie? But it's not okay for her to comment about someone's size that's larger.
Well, I don't know her name, so, okay, you got me on that, but moving on. No chubbies. No chubbies. No, I got something for no chubbies.
You said it. Own it.
What is Oculus's approach to their clear gender gap and how you're going to not port that into VR?
We are having a hard time hiring all the people that we want. It doesn't matter what they look like.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter movement. Go around talking about black lives when the thing is, you have become a racist. Shame on you for being a part of Black Lives Matter.
All lives matter. Not just one color. Not just two colors. All lives matter.
Hey, there's one race. Shame on you.
Hey, go back to Florida and cook up some more crank.
Cleveland, I thought you were better.
Fuck you.
There's one race. You won't. Calm down, Shaniqua.
Most people that have guns don't use them on other people.
But you said if you had a gun, you're going to use it.
Well,
you don't.
What's that
Most
saying? If
people
you
don't.
have a gun, you better
Most
be able to
people-
use it?
Most people are overwhelmingly good.
Okay, yeah, but most people have a gun. 350 million Americans. There are 310 million guns.
Right, that doesn't mean that most people have a gun. It doesn't distribute exactly that way.
But, you know, people, people
You know
are
that from now.
blaming
You shouldn't
violence
say
in
that.
movies and videos
Well, that's
on
insane.
this.
That's insane.
Really?
It's not
What is it called?
insane,
Art of War, Man of War? What do the kids play?
Call of Duty. Call of
We don't
Duty.
allow that in our house. Really? So
Call
busy
of
buying Call of Duty. There needs to be more hugs in households.
Those aren't mutually exclusive.
Well,
nothing in Call of Duty says you can't hug your family.
Well, you know what?
Nothing
This
says-
boy's
there's
boy's
no-
favorite game pen was Call of Duty.
Yes, and many peaceful people. You're doing the same thing. Call of Duty is the most popular game there is. Everyone's playing it, so of course bad people are going to play it too.
Yeah.
To try to blame Shakespeare and the violence in Shakespeare and the violence in art for violence that happens in the real world is something that's been tried for years and is always wrong. People must take responsibility. We must stop blaming society and actually blame the perpetrator.
Yeah, you know what?
Call of Duty is something that young people like and enjoy, and it's a game.
I think
and
it's up
most
to
of those
parents,
people
though,
are
to
most
observe
of those
their
people are
kids.
violent. Most of the
To
people
see,
are
like,
violent.
we need to
Most
take
people are
responsibility
good.
for our own houses.
And we
Jamie
have to
Foxx?
stop disliking our children. We attack comic books. We attack monster movies. Now we're attacking video games. Love our children and know that they
Take
can
care of your
play.
household.
Let them play.
Jamie Foxx is one of the only celebrities
And
that
Jamie
tweeted
Foxx
out
is
stuff.
wrong.
Well, he says
Dead
we
wrong.
cannot turn our backs and say that violence in films or anything that we do doesn't have some sort of influence. It does. I go along with that.
Blame the killers. Why not blame the killers?
Well, some of the
Do
killers
not
learned
blame
their
the
killing
artists.
through movies.
Blame the killers, not the artists. Why are you blaming artists for something that bad people did? Shakespeare is not a bad person. He wrote beautiful stuff. It has suicide, it has murder, and it tells us something about our hearts. And people who watch Shakespeare don't kill. And Call of Duty is art. It is not some sort of propaganda thing. And that's an easy way
How
out.
about this? That this is a case of violence with guns, video games, and mental health. Now, here's a kid who was borderline autistic with Asperger's. They have a lot of social problems.
But they
don't
have
know how to
no violent problems.
No. Autistic
People
kids are
saw
usually
things.
victims. My point is that if you sit this kid in a room all day shooting people, if they have no social skills,
How do you know that?
Because
You're just making
it's
that
been
up.
well, it's
He
been
ain't no
reported.
social It's been reported.
There's no evidence that Asperger's syndrome people go violent from playing games.
that's
you
not
have
what I'm
you have
saying.
not one data point of evidence on that.
I'm not saying that.
Well, you just said it.
Well, let me try to be clearer.
Please.
Here's a person who has trouble figuring out what's social and what's not. And he's inundated with shoot. And then a little plan comes across, well, maybe I'll just go to school and shoot people.
No, you've just done cause and effect where it doesn't exist.
There's no guilt. There's no guilt. There's no conscience.
That's not true that there's no guilt and no
He
conscience.
wouldn't make eye
That's not
contact with his
Asperger's.
barber.
Please don't tear those people apart.
I'm
I
not
have
trying
good
to
friends
tear-
with
they are very
Asperger's.
intelligent
They have
people.
they have conscience. They have empathy. All of that is not true. You're spreading lies about people who are part of our society and who we need to love and take care of and cherish.
But most men are pretty hopeless when newborn bundles arrive, and they're so incredibly impressed by how women appear to know what to do, and then they think, well, I'll go off and do extra work and make some money, and they justify it in that way.
Christopher, I've heard you say this.
Yeah.
And
Well, now you're hearing me say it again.
No, but my point would be that I think after the 70s that is actually not true. That may have been true, but I don't think that is true, that men are so less capable of dealing with children and that it's better that they go off and earn money. You know, maybe the mother could go and earn some money. Did that never occur
I'm not
to you?
having any woman of mine go to work.
You know you're going to get into trouble if you go down there.
No, I won't. No, they don't need to work. They can if they like, but they don't have to.
You are joking.
No, I'm not. No, I would expect
Oh, tell me
I
you're
would
joking.
expect to take care of them. They work if you want, but you don't have to.
You are the commander's son, aren't
Yeah,
you?
I am,
Yes. You really mean that?
Sure.
You don't think women should go and work?
Yeah, I said they're welcome to do that. I'm thrilled if they want to. If they don't want to, they don't have to.
Is this
That's
you
what
being
I'm-
ironic?
that's what
Is
I'm
this
there
your
for.
famous attachment to irony?
No. What's so difficult about it?
It's just wrong. It's just absolutely wrong.
No, they're called the gentle sex for a good reason. want to see them coarsened in the coarsened in the labour market. No, not if they don't want to. They shouldn't feel they shouldn't feel they have to.
180.
No, I'm here to look after them. But no one got
Christopher,
it.
I've given you every single chance to opt out of that last
Oh,
statement.
no, I mean, that's my view. I don't think a Mrs. Hitchens should have to work.
It's been lovely to have you. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's very nice of you to invite me.
Please, a huge thank you to the sexist but charming Christopher Hitchens.
Thank you very much. That was it, wasn't it?
Yeah. It.
You had to say it. Thanks a lot.
How can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't... And when... You know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
Anybody can jump in. It's an open mic there.
So conduct yourself. That's what I tell them. I just don't just throw out that statement. It's a reason why I tell them that. I tell them keep your hands on the steering wheel. I tell them don't say much to them other than what you have to. I try to tell. I want them to stay alive at the end of the day, right? Because it's not going to look good for them. And then you gonna have, is the way the system's set up. They're gonna side with him.
Well, then why aren't their parents telling them? Because I was talking about that. My parents taught me hands right on the top of the steering wheel. Yes, sir. No, sir. Shut off the car. Pull over. Do not reach for anything until he asks you to give him his license. Why is it? Listen, we can both. You feel the need to say that because young black people aren't doing it. Why aren't their parents teaching them? Why is it only in the black community that they're not complying?
We have a different. Unfortunately, it's sad that you got to teach people how to deal with police. But like I was raised that way, son. You pull over by them police.
Me too.
Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Don't give them much information. If they ask for you to get your license, tell them where it's at, and then get permission from them to get it.
Right.
And put your hand right back on the steering wheel. If for some reason they want to arrest you, don't fight with them. Go ahead with them. We will get a lawyer. We'll get you out. This is what I was told, and that's the way I conduct myself on police stops. Right. I don't tell people in my videos, yeah, you fight with them police.
No, I know you don't. But no, I didn't say. I said the opposite. I said you're saying this.
To see that.
I'm giving you credit. I'm giving you credit. I said you teach this, right? I've seen you do this. The conversation, by the way, you just said that you had with your parent is exactly what I had with my dad. Okay? White person, black person, the exact same thing. We should handle arrests the exact same way. There's a right way and then there's a wrong way. And I'm saying, giving you credit, you are teaching that on your channel because you recognize there is a serious problem in the black community with young black people, particularly people below your generation and my generation, not doing those things. Why do you have to teach them? Why aren't their parents teaching them as your parents taught you and my parents taught me?
I can't really explain about parenting, but at the end of the day, when you talk about me and police officers, there are stories I've done on cops.
That's important. Parenting is important. Could it be because there aren't parents in the house?
The parenting issue is pretty big in this country, and that's a whole different topic.
It's not the same. Statistically, it is a real problem in the black community that's not with other communities.
It's a problem all over, not just the black community. You can find, when you go around and talk to different people, you will see every community has issues with their kids today not listening.
No, statistical fatherless households is a real problem in the black community. We both know that. You've talked about it. Larry Elders talked about it.
I have talked about it, and then they got white folks that don't have a father.
No, it's exclusive to the black community, the statistical anomaly of it being so staggeringly high. So instead of vilifying officers for kids reaching for a gun or for kids or people refusing to comply, yelling that they're going to shoot officers, wouldn't we say if we want to address, we're talking about solutions, getting more fathers in the household?
We always support two-parent households. That's what I'm about. I'm about family. I'm about people staying together. But, I just can't sit here and just have you put it out there, oh, well, only black people have fathers'
I
households.
didn't say only
everybody
black
else
people.
have two parents. Well, you said you kind of insinuating that black people are the only ones or the leaders of all this other stuff. Like at the end of the day, let's go with that argument. Let's say that's.
But it's not my argument. See, that's a straw man. Phil, I'm trying to improve your arguing ability here. That's not my argument. You don't get to argue against a ghost argument, a straw man that I never made. I never said only black people.
Hi, Ben. So unconscious bias is a concept well documented in psychological studies, which is basically that people associate negative things with people of color and positive things with whites. So if that is true, given that that is true, how does white privilege not exist?
Okay, so you're asking about unconscious bias. I apologize because it's kind of echoey, but the question was, if there is unconscious bias, just to repeat it so I'm making sure I get it right, if there is unconscious bias, how does white privilege not exist?
The question is, given that there is unconscious bias, how does white privilege not exist?
So number one, so when I speak about white privilege, so when I speak about white privilege, I'm speaking specifically about behavior. Okay, there have been no studies, and really I've looked at these studies, the connection between what they call implicit bias, this is their favorite phrase now, implicit bias, unconscious bias, and biased behavior has yet to be proven at any level that is even remotely necessary to be used in, for example, a courtroom, which is why it's never been used in a courtroom. It is also true that there is no way, there really isn't, there's been no proven way to alleviate what they call unconscious bias, which means that we're ghost hunting. So what I would suggest is that if there is unconscious bias, and I'll acknowledge the possibility or the reality of unconscious bias, if there is, then I need you to I don't care about what's in people's heads so much as what they do. So if you point me to a racist behavior, don't worry, I'll let you respond. If you point me to a racist behavior, I'm happy to stand alongside you and protest it. What I can't do is protest about things in people's head that I don't know about because I'm not a mind reader.
Okay, so that's a really interesting response, and to that I have two questions. Firstly, what I've heard you say that this is something that, the way people think doesn't affect their behavior. So that's the first thing you've said. So I'm really curious if you can kind of give me another example of a thought that somebody has which doesn't affect their behavior. Like, do people who, support Trump not vote for him? Like, I'm very curious about that.
Yes.
And secondly, so the second thing that I want to ask is that if it's something it's hard to fix, does it mean we shouldn't do anything about it? Because you said, I don't know if we can change how people think. Does that mean we shouldn't try?
I mean, first of all, not a great impression. But beyond that, my voice isn't that low. But beyond that, as far as the first question, which is, do people have thoughts that don't manifest in behavior? Yes, all the time.
For instance?
For instance, every thought that you have about walking up here and strangling me right now. I assume like we have thoughts all the time that don't manifest in behavior, and this is true every single day. We consider thoughts that cross our minds. And the problem with unconscious bias is the idea is you don't even know that you're having the thought, right? So how can you stop it if you don't even know that you're having it? But then we should be able to gauge the unconscious bias and its impact on behavior. That's why it's unconscious bias as opposed to conscious bias. The idea behind unconscious bias is that it's not even a ghost, it's a ghost of a ghost, because you don't even know you're having the thought. So people, the whole idea behind diversity training is the idea that you can retrain people to stop their chain of thought in order so that it doesn't manifest in behavior. I don't think that every thought manifests in behavior. If it did, then every time a man saw a good-looking woman walk down the street, a straight man saw a good-looking woman down the street, we'd have a real mess on our hands. So the second question, the idea was a little too broad for me to respond to, which is, just because something is tough, don't we have to face up to it? Yes, we have to face up to tough things all the time. And one of the tough things I would suggest that we face up to is that you have a lot more control over your own behavior and the decisions you make than the supposedly widespread unconscious bias of people you've never met.
This is fun. Why would you ban them? That makes no sense to me.
We're at war with that region, and we did the same thing in World War II.
Islam?
Actually, we are.
No, we're not. You're okay. Okay, I'm done. We're not at war with. I'm not at war with Islam personally.
We're at war with radical jihadism, which is Islam.
I'm done. Yeah.
But yet you still say we're at a war with Islam?
Are we not at a war?
That is the most ignorant, stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Are we not at a war with radical jihadism?
Okay, but are they not at a war with radical Christianity, okay?
Where are we at war with radical Christianity?
Really?
No, really, I don't know.
Are you kidding me?
No, actually explain to me.
Just...
we at war with radical Christians?
Yeah, they're trying to target us for no reason.
Where are the radical Christianity war? Where is that happening?
The people in power. The people in power want to make us turn on each other. That's exactly why you're trying to do this.
These are radical Christians?
Get feelings from
I just
people.
want to know about this radical Christian war that's going on. I haven't heard of it.
Ask other countries. That's all I gotta say.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, I actually lived in the Middle East for 2 years as a child.
That's really good. Now, if you could reply with the proper, like assalamu.
You see, I had a... Yeah, no.
Alaikum assalam.
Yeah, not a fan.
Have a good day.
Growing up there as a young girl, I wasn't a big fan of like having to cover myself all the time. And, the actual rape culture that goes on in the Middle East, and throwing gays off of buildings and such. I wasn't a big fan of that. Being an American over there.
Neither am I, but you don't think Donald Trump is after the same policies?
I don't think he wants to throw gays off of buildings. No.
No, but he's openly against them in radical form.
Open against what?
Gay people, Islamic people, black people, Mexican people. He's all about the hate.
What did he do to gay people?
He's openly slandered a bunch of...
what did he say? I don't know. I would like to know about this. I haven't heard this.
You haven't heard anything about...
I haven't heard him say bad things about gays, no.
Okay. Well, look at stuff from the 1990s.
I don't know if you can even really compare saying a few things to really throwing them off of buildings either.
You're right. You're right. Sticks and stones will not break bones, but words do hurt.
Yeah, I think I'd rather hear a few nasty words than be thrown off a building.
Me too. And that's where we're all the same on a human level.
Don't think it's quite a valid comparison, is my point.
Okay. Well, that's different. Have a good day.
You're saying the wife of the president is gonna...
Go ahead, Sarah.
Never heard either one of their policies. Just what color is their blouse?
Are you saying that the wife of the president of the United States doesn't matter?
I'm saying that Michelle Obama, the current wife, should run for president.
No, absolutely.
Why? Because she danced on Ellen? Being the wife of the president versus actually running the country is so fucking different. Give me a fucking break.
Also danced
so
in
if you marry
Ohio.
some dude and you're out there crushing it in arenas, your husband should then go do fucking stand-up because he hung around your comedy notebook? It's not different. It's not different. This whole fucking thing with these first ladies fucking picking a goddamn cause and all of a sudden like,
Here it comes.
they're presidential is fucking ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous at all. It's not ridiculous because women have an opinion and we talk in your ear all the time. Are you telling me that when you designed your house, it was all your decision?
It has nothing.
And your wife didn't have anything to do with it?
It has nothing to do with sex.
Are you telling me that you can go on tour wherever the fuck you want and your wife is like, yeah, sure, go
I'll
ahead.
wait this out. What it has to do with is actually doing the job.
What do you mean doing the job? You
My
say,
mother was a nurse. I hung out with her forever.
She's a lawyer just like him.
Time out. My mother was a nurse. I hung out with her my whole fucking life.
Right.
Okay? If someone came into the ICU unit, I didn't know what the fuck to do.
Well, that's because you're
Just
not
because I
trained.
hung around with her with scrubs.
That's completely different. You're not trained as a nurse. Barack Obama is a lawyer, and so is Michelle.
That's not a politician.
But it doesn't matter. Like, he wasn't a politician when he got elected. That was the whole thing about him.
No.
He had been a
But
senator,
going
but he
from
had very
fucking,
little experience.
You're talking about going from never being a politician to the highest fucking office
Which is
ever.
exactly what Trump is doing. That's exactly what Donald Trump
voting.
just did.
I didn't vote for him, you fucking lunatic.
I'm not saying you did.
You see that? That is sexist shit right there.
I didn't say you did.
There.
I didn't say that you did.
Right there.
I didn't
right
say that
fucking
you did.
there. That is the bullshit.
That is not what I said.
That is the double standard.
I did not say that
bullshit.
you voted for him.
Right
If I was a white knight and I was trying to fuck Sarah Tiana, I'd be yelling at you right now, Bill Burr.
Listen,
guys,
this is the point that I'm making. If you're married to someone not in the field that you're in, does not make you qualified to do that job. That's all I just said.
Yeah.
If you're married to a guy who builds houses and you don't build houses, that doesn't mean that I want to live in something that you just fucking built. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. I think it's. I feel like there is a national misogynism and sexism that exists, and I'm very upset about it.
Hang on.
myself.
Let me put Bill Burr's golf ball on his tee.
Yeah, please do.
As he...
No, I'm ready. I'm ready to fucking get it back
He's talking
in my
to
face with a
his
slight
what are you,
accent and
caddy
some
about which
aggressiveness.
club he's
I'm
going to use.
Why can't it be the 52 felonies she got accused of that somehow disappeared? But if I had one of those, I'd be hanging out with Snowden in Russia.
Ooh. Morgan.
You know, I have to be honest with you. The Democrats did pick the wrong person because they've done so much shit.
Right.
They really are the Democrats' Bushes. They've done so much fucking shit. They had a lot of fucking enemies.
Yeah, but
They
you're
did.
saying, in that, you're saying the Republicans picked the right person, which is one of the most.
That's not what I'm saying. You're putting those words in my mouth.
I am.
Well, then stop doing that.
I'm not your point. I'm just saying that here comes a qualified person, and you go, okay, why didn't she make it? You go, there's clearly people in this country who are racist, who are misogynistic, who are homophobic, who are xenophobic.
How can
and
you
they're-
just blow off all of those? Like how many felonies do you have to be accused of?
Well,
You
it's
have-
not
if you
like
have
he's not accused of
200
things as well.
I'm not saying he's a good guy.
Well, I'm just saying that you
But
can't blow
to
off
literally
either of
just
them.
say the reason why you're not voting for Clinton is because you're a misogynistic is actually sexist.
But I don't think that the people who voted for Trump.
It is. It's like you're saying, yeah, it's
I don't believe that all the people who voted for Trump are smart enough to assess every wrongdoing that they think Clinton did. I think that they.
I think that's because you live out here.
Sure, I live in a bubble.
Because you live out here and you think everybody who doesn't live near an ocean is a dope. No, I'm just saying that people out here have a fucking tendency to call 90% of the states flyover states and think that they're a bunch of fucking morons and then have the nerve to fucking trash Fox News where you guys are the exact same fucking people all the way to the left and it's annoying.
Absolutely.
It's annoying. It's annoying.
He's got you there.
Information that turned out to be so false and fake out. I think it's a disgrace. And I say that, and that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace. That information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public. As far as BuzzFeed, which is a failing pile of garbage, writing it, I think they're going to suffer the consequences. They already are. And as far as CNN going out of their way to build it up, and by the way, we just found out I was coming down. Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is a very talented lawyer. He's a good lawyer in my firm. It was just reported that it wasn't this Michael Cohen they were talking about. So all night long, it's Michael Cohen. I said, I want to see your passport. He brings his passport to my office. I say, hey, wait a minute. He didn't leave the country. He wasn't out of the country. They had Michael Cohen of the Trump Organization was in Prague. It turned out to be a different Michael Cohen. It's a disgrace what took place. It's a disgrace. And I think they ought to apologize to start with Michael Cohen.
Since you're attacking us, can you give us a question? No, Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You
is
are attacking
terrible.
our news organization.
Your organization
Can you give
is
us a
terrible.
chance
Let's
to
go.
ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can
Quiet.
you state,
Quiet.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you state
She's asking
categorically,
a question.
Mr.
Don't be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you
No, I'm
give
not
us a
going to give you a
question?
question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
Go ahead.
can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not
Go ahead.
appropriate.
I think it's important to distinguish between the kind of equality that you're talking about, which is you're basically saying that women shouldn't have money to provide for their children. Men shouldn't have to pay money to provide for their children. When men actually petition for for custody of their children, they're very likely to get it.
What? That's actually not true.
That actually is.
That is total bull.
When men actually request custody of their children, they almost always get at least joint custody.
Men always lose custody battles. There's a difference between they get it and they almost always get joint custody. I mean, there's a very big difference. There's a massive bias against men on custody battles.
It's just a second. To see you survive off of welfare payments. It's not like women are living high on the hog with their $300 a month to care for their children.
It's not $300 a month. Welfare with food stamps and more than 3 kids is more like $1,200 a month. Okay, so Jill, let me ask you this: is sexism dead?
No, sexism is not dead. Sexism is alive and well. If you look at the statistics, even among American women, which I know one of Gavin's talking points is that if you want to find sexism, you have to go abroad, and American women are just fine. American women do make less money. Yes, the gender gap has been pretty much not entirely erased, but it's been very much condensed among young single women without children. But as soon as
they make more money, young single women without children.
That's
make more money than men.
That's what she's saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying they make more money.
How do you argue with someone who just keeps making up figures?
I'm not making up figures.
Single women without kids make more money than men.
Figures? Like, which figure do we trust? Because the president has been talking about 77 cents, that women make 77 cents on the dollar for every man. What are the figures?
But
and what
has debunked a lot of that.
And
it's not just maternity. It's also men are more willing to do things like ask for a raise. And men are more willing to work in more difficult jobs that pay them a greater salary. It's not as cut and dried as, and by the way, Gavin brought up a really good point. If employers thought they could get away with paying people 77 cents on the dollar, all major companies would only hire women.
They do it with illegal aliens already.
When Gorsuch went up and spoke to a Democratic senator, we covered in depth the fact that Gorsuch had said something that actually endeared him to Democrats, and that actually a lot of establishment Republicans appreciated, and it actually, many people thought, tempered Gorsuch, or at least revealed him as they felt to be a moderate that they think he is. I mean, how are we covering this in a negative way, maybe a nuanced way? Or Donald Trump goes to the African American History Museum and he talks about countering bigotry, and we cover that as well.
Yes, you did cover that. So that's one of two of hundreds of stories, most of which are extremely negative. And God bless you for doing that positive stuff. But look at the way they slammed him for not covering right immediately the desecration of the Jewish cemetery outside St. Louis. I mean, this is a guy, and look at the way the media is endlessly playing him up as an anti-Semite. This is a guy who has a Jewish son-in-law, whose own daughter converted to Judaism, who's never been quoted saying a single anti-Semitic word, and they're constantly slamming him as being a racist or a white supremacist or something without any evidence of it at all. I think, with the greatest respect, and I appreciate your pointing out things where I was mistaken, but with the greatest respect, this is a guy that they're just smearing all the time. I don't blame him for wanting to fire back at them. If he were as smooth as Ronald Reagan, he would handle it more smoothly. But no one, again, will ever be as smooth as Ronald Reagan.
You said you think the press is trying to do to him what they did to Richard Nixon.
Yes.
So give us your perspective on that, because a lot of people look at what happened to Richard Nixon and they say, I mean, what Richard Nixon did to himself. The tapes from the Oval Office showed that 6 days after the Watergate break-in, he was discussing himself. He was discussing a cover-up. You know, the smoking gun tape. I mean, how did the media do that to Richard Nixon?
The media picked one tiny little thing that he did. One tiny little thing he did.
What tiny little thing?
One tiny little thing he did, which is just to discuss a cover-up. He didn't do the cover-up. They didn't follow through with the cover-up payments that he discussed. They just discussed it. This was a guy who brought more peace to the world than any president in the 20th century. Open relations with China. First strategic arms limitation talks with the Soviet Union and leading to an agreement. Ended the war in Vietnam. Brought home the prisoners of war. Saved the life of the state of Israel. And so
you think the Watergate scandal and what was uncovered was phooey?
It was not a good thing. Shouldn't have done it, obviously. But compared with his achievements, nothing. And I think they're doing the exact same thing to Mr. Trump, whose achievements, by the way, compared with Nixon, are nil. But I think they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to undo him, basically, before he even gets started.
Let's go to Boca Raton, Florida. She's on the other side. Joe in Boca Raton, welcome. You say the Arizona law is wrong. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it's absolutely racist that they're telling the illegal aliens that they can't come into Arizona. They can do what they want to. I mean, we're America. We have to have open arms.
Wait. You're saying too many things at once. They're saying what?
That we need to have...
You're saying, wait, ma'am. Are you aware of the fact that a country has borders? Are you aware of that?
I'm saying that we need to get rid of our borders so we can welcome all forms and walks of life.
Of course, you're pulling my leg.
I'm serious. Just look at how your ancestors got here.
Well, they didn't come here illegally. Maybe yours did. How did yours get here? Did they come here illegally?
I don't know, but they got over here somehow, and now.
Well, apparently they pulled from the lowest level of the gene pool for women from where you came from. That you don't even know how a nation is defined. How many people do you think this country could sustain with open borders? Is there a limit, an upper limit in your mind?
I think we could sustain so many people because there's capitalism.
I said how many? How many people are in America today? How many millions?
600 million.
Oh, my God. Oh, boy, we're in trouble, aren't we? So you just guessed at that, I could see, because that's not the correct number. Okay, we'll give you another chance. How many people do you think the United States of America could sustain if we had no borders and anybody could just enter the country? How many people?
We need to put limits on people's income because people are making way too much money, and they need to...
So, in other words, it's not the number of people here, it's the amount of money people are making.
Yes, it's the greed in America. We need to spread that out.
I see. How much money do you make a year, Joe?
Nothing. Right now I'm on a welfare check, but that doesn't matter anyway.
Ah, you're on a welfare check. That's why you're so benevolent with other people's money. So you're telling men like me who work for a living, who pay your welfare check, that I should be limited in how much I make so you can make more money doing nothing?
Well, I think that you don't pay my welfare check. I think Obama pays my welfare check. And
Wait, what do you mean? Obama pays it out of his pocket? Where does Obama get the money from, Joe?
I don't know his stash. I don't know where he gets it. But the main thing is...
What do you mean you don't know where he gets it from? It's called the public treasury. Where does the money come from into the public treasury, Joe?
Illegal aliens who work for a living and then they pass the money to the government.
Joe, you're a very sick person. I really pity you, Joe. And you never should have been able to get on the show because a man wants to find hell as a place where there is no reason.
Do I tell you something?
You're a traitor to your own thought. If you think they're okay, God help you.
Work now.
How do you work now?
Hold on. Before you start ranting at me,
yeah.
Right? I am. You can see what colour I am.
I can.
So don't you dare try and put it on my toes. Oh, no, you've come, let me explain. I grew up in this country in 1970, yeah? Do you know what I used to see when I come out my front door?
What?
The letters NF.
Yeah, and that's what they are.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not. Because when you break down what they're actually trying to say, it's actually common sense. When you look at it, you're the guys that are causing the problem here. All yous are dressed in black with your fucking balaclavas.
Balaclava? Where's the balaclava?
Shit going on. Calling everyone a Nazi.
The Nazis?
So I'm a Nazi.
You must be if you
I am a Nazi.
You must be if you follow them.
Why am I a Nazi,
what?
you silly woman?
I'm not a silly
Don't
woman.
you dare brand people with words like that when you can't relate it. Right, yeah. So you brand your hatred all you want, but you're the one branding the fucking hatred about. People there have got a legitimate reason to say what they're saying. People like you are curtailing the speech. Through political correctness, people cannot speak in this country anymore.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Donald Trump's feud with the media got even weirder and more intense over the weekend after the president tweeted a video of his staged brawl with wrestling mogul Vince McMahon with his CNN logo superimposed over McMahon's face. It was a little confusing since CNN and pro wrestling could not be more different. One is an entertainment venture that promotes over-the-top fictional narratives and rigs its fights. The other is the WWE.
Pow!
First of all, this sneering mocking of Americans who suddenly wake up one day and find out no one is speaking English in their neighborhoods, I think is extremely elitist and snooty. I'm quite sure you all wouldn't like it if your kids came home from school and they sounded like Sarah Palin. I think that would be a cultural shock for you. Certainly in California, most of the neighborhoods that have gone all Hispanic are black neighborhoods, and not through casual movement. One of the ways our culture changes with immigration, both legal and illegal, is there is not a lot of tolerance, as much tolerance as Americans have. You have black gangs, or rather Hispanic gangs, going into the black neighborhoods, screaming epithets, throwing bottles at their houses. The LA Times has written this up extensively. So I think it's very sneering and mocking of you to be referring to mostly African American and other immigrant neighborhoods that suddenly aren't speaking English, and oh, they're afraid of Spanish. No, they think that their kids shouldn't be turned away from a job at McDonald's because they don't speak Spanish. That was one witness's testimony in Congress, a black guy from Los Angeles. Settlers, why does it make a difference that you're a settler? No, it isn't that we just first come, first serve. No, it's that settlers created this country. It wasn't here. And yeah, a lot of things change when we bring in particularly such large numbers. I mean, there's a reason that the main immigration restrictionist group in the country is called Numbers USA, not, you know, Mexicans suck USA. It's that we do need to assimilate people to this wonderful country of ours where we do learn to be tolerant and not practice racism or anti-Semitism and respect one another. Oh, well, for those of you who think that anti-Semitism has gotten worse, the ADL does studies on this every year, and every year they find that the main practitioners of anti-Semitism are your Hispanic friends. So you might want to reconsider the mass just amnestying them all as they're coming in. No, we do have a wonderful country, and we need to take time to assimilate people, not let them live in ghettos and bring in their cultures. There's a reason they left their cultures to come to our culture, and we didn't leave our culture to go to theirs.
When you say the settlers created the country, are you including the enslaved Americans as settlers, or is that a separate group?
Yes, I am, actually.
They were settlers?
Not settlers in that sense, but I mean, as many people have pointed out, we are not a multiracial country, we are not a multicultural country, we are a biracial country. For 400 years, this country was black and white. And we have had black people here as long as white people.
Is this a biracial country?
And African Americans, can I finish this point? It seems to have set off the crowd. Look, African Americans obviously got the short end of the stick for about 200 years. This is why I was explaining on the last panel. This is why we have civil rights. This is why we have constitutional provisions. This is why we allow, this is why we have affirmative action. It wasn't the Rainbow Coalition. It was to make up, to redress specific grievances done to African Americans, slavery, Jim Crow laws, and now suddenly, you know, everybody's running across the border and, oh, me too, I'm part of this. No, civil rights are for African Americans. They are not for people who arrived yesterday or last week. We didn't do anything to you. Republicans didn't do anything to anybody.
Okay,
I mean, there's just, wow, I don't even know where to start. So, in that long-winded rant, you proceeded to insult people in a racist way and then have the audacity to say that our immigration policies are racist, or allowing more immigrants in would lead to more racism. It's absurd.
How is anything I said racist?
How is what you said? You just talked about people speaking Spanish and how parents don't want to hear that because they're concerned that their kids might want to end up working at McDonald's. You're assuming that people are coming into this country.
No, you weren't listening.
Yeah.
No, there was a testimony before Congress from LA communities where black witnesses were going in saying, my kid applied to the local McDonald's, they wouldn't hire him because he didn't speak Spanish. It is mostly black communities that are being overwhelmed with illegal immigrants, and to be mocking them and saying they're afraid of Spanish people, I think is very dismissive and insulting.
Well, here's what happens in this free, hold on.
Well, if you look at the demographics of the people that are killed by police, disproportionately a number of them are black and brown people. Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. And in a lot of cases, 69% of black people that are shot and killed by police are actually unarmed, or they didn't pose a violent threat. So in my piece, I show that police violence disproportionately affects the black and brown communities. More so than other communities. So
okay, well, but they're also much higher. I mean, this is again a complex matter, and there are much higher crime rates in those communities for, you know, who knows why, but there are, and so that may be a factor in this. But here are some numbers that I think show just how complicated this is. So there was a study a couple of years ago of the about 2,700 police shootings between 2013 and 2015, and I'm quoting now, found that the odds of a black suspect being killed by a black officer were consistently greater than the odds of a black suspect being killed by a white officer. That doesn't prove anything necessarily, but it does maybe show that racism isn't as simple in this context as you're making it sound. If a black suspect's more likely to be shot by a black cop, then what does that tell us about racism?
Well, I think what it tells us is we have to look at the system and not the individual police officers that are killing these people. Systematically, the way police officers are trained, they're taught to go for violence first. In a lot of states, they don't tell police officers to resort to other means to subdue a subject other than shooting and killing them. So
okay, but hold on, but right, there are 2 different things. You know, whether non-lethal force ought to be used first is a valid question, but I want to get to the question of race. So, and I'm quoting, white officers statistically less likely than black officers to kill black suspects. So if all cops are being taught to be racist, why are black cops more likely to shoot black suspects? It doesn't really make much sense, does it?
No, you're looking at it individually. When it needs to be looked at as a systemic.
Looking at the numbers.
No, it's supposed to be. You have to look at it in a systemic way, where you look at the system that allows these police officers to commit these acts of violence, and then they don't get held accountable for it. We've seen time and again police officers getting off on killing another person. Geronimo Yanez, who was shot and killed, Philando Castillo, he was acquitted of all charges.
I mean, again, I don't want to be mean, but you're maybe dodging the point a little bit. I think some of the issues that you're raising are valid issues. I don't want anybody to commit brutality against anybody else, and I mean it. But to charge that racism is at the core of this without any evidence, because you actually don't have any evidence at all, and there's some countervailing evidence, makes people more fearful, makes them hate each other, makes our society way less happy and less trusting. And so it's a big deal to charge something like that, and don't you think you should pull back until you can prove it? I guess that's my point.
Well, I do think I do prove it in my piece, because if you look at the statistics and you look at the data, police violence disproportionately affects black and brown bodies, and it always has. Throughout history.
Why are black cops more likely to shoot black suspects than white cops are? How does that fit into your neat little racism package? I don't get that. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, as police officers, they're part of the police system in this country, that no matter what race you are, you still are taught the same tactics.
But why are they more likely? I mean, it doesn't, look, again, I just want you to open your mind a little bit. This isn't college. And just like look at the facts and then draw your conclusions from those. And sometimes, you know, you reach a point where you're like, I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but it's not as simple as my professors told me it was. That's all I'm hoping that you'll conclude.
Here, had a person try and vandalize our pro-life display. Just trying to peacefully protest, and people get crazy. Thank for the police.
Well, I think it's important to note that France is the modern architect of Islamophobia, and you can't discuss you can't discuss assimilation without first discussing how the culture of both state-sponsored and societal bigotry towards Muslims has really marginalized.
What'd they do?
You know, the 5 to 10 million Muslims in France. They did a range of things. They passed the 2004 headscarf ban, the 2010 niqab ban. You know, considerable legislation. Even before then, that really stigmatized and marginalized Muslims in France.
How are the French people, before I go back to Brigitte, supposed to get these Muslims to assimilate into their country, to become Frenchmen as opposed to Muslims?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to view French assimilation as being considerably distinct from American assimilation, right? In the France model, they essentially pose an ultimatum. You're either French or Muslim. There's no hybridized, hyphenated identities like we have here in the States. And that's a difficult decision for anybody, right? I mean, individuals latch onto the religions and their faiths really tightly. Another note is that we talk about the freedom of expression, but there's no free exercise of religion in France, especially for Muslims. So these are core principles, I think, that can be eliminated from the discourse.
Brigitte, is that true?
Absolutely not true. I mean, look, there are so many different people from different cultures and different religions that immigrate to France and to different countries around the world. How come they assimilate? I mean, I can tell you from my own country of Lebanon, millions of people fled, and they settled in France, and they assimilated into French culture. French culture is open-minded. They are tolerant, just like any other Western culture. The problem is with Islamic immigration, no matter where they go, whether Australia, America, Canada, Europe, they are not assimilating, and to the contrary, the second generation is even becoming more radical than the first generation. So this is a problem coming from the Islamic culture itself and their ideology, and has nothing to do with the nonsense Islamophobia that Arab pundits come on television and give us. And it's time to throw political correctness in the garbage where it belongs and start calling a spade a spade.
So do you see a pattern here? I mean, it's not just Venezuela, but it's also, I don't know, 1970s Bulgaria and Romania and Albania and the Soviet Union and Cuba and North Korea, and every country that has tried this economic system winds up in poverty. So do you see a connection between all of these cases?
Well, Tucker, what I think is extremely important is we need to acknowledge that what Venezuela is currently facing right now is terrorism at the hands of the opposition. The opposition has bombed schools, they've bombed buses, they've taken wiring and strung it across roads to behead cops on motorcycles. These aren't choir boys, these are violent extremists hell-bent on taking away the progress Venezuela has made over the past few years.
So who's got the guns in Venezuela? Private gun ownership is obviously illegal in Venezuela, and so the overwhelming majority of firearms are in the hands of the government. So how can the opposition to the government be the ones perpetrating the violence?
Well, Tucker, if you look at the casualties that have happened in the past few months in these protests, the majority of those that have been killed have been trade unionist leaders, have been dedicated Chavistas, have been people on the left. So obviously the ones that are being targeted are those that support the government.
Dakota, I don't want to rock your world, but I think reliable statistics probably pretty hard to come by under the Maduro government, I would say, which controls, of course, all the statistics coming out of Venezuela. But the bottom line is the country has had a socialist government for over 10 years. It's become poorer every year, despite having the world's largest oil reserves. Does that give you any cause to stop for a second and say, you know, maybe this whole socialism thing doesn't work that well? It's never worked anywhere. It's not working again. Maybe there's a lesson for me as a young American, no?
Well, Tucker, everyone in Venezuela, including the president, Nicolas Maduro, acknowledges that reforms are needed in things like food distribution and elsewhere. But very few, if anyone, in Venezuela want to go back to the pre-Chavez years of unbridled capitalism. So much so that the leader of the opposition, Enrique Capriles, calls himself a socialist.
Presumably he means something different by that. Is your Spanish pretty good? I mean, do you have a pretty good handle on popular opinion in Venezuela? How would you know what the majority of people in Venezuela want?
Well, I mean, all you have to do is look at the astounding amount of elections that have been held over the past few years, ever since the early 2000s when Chavez came in. People have come out time and time again to vote for the United Socialist Party, to vote for constitutional referendums, and to vote for Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro in elections that have been certified by international observers like the Carter Center.
So you really think that the government of Venezuela is on the level, that it is a purely democratic government, that it's basically successful economically, How can you think that? I mean, have you spent a lot of time there? Have you talked to a lot of people about it? I mean, like, what gives you that idea?
Well, Tucker, if you look at the international observers that have certified these elections, I mean, what stake does Jimmy Carter and the Carter Center have in defining fraudulent elections as democratic? I mean, I think most people, if you look at the violence that has happened after these elections, every time the government has won an election, there's been mass violence, yet the one time the opposition won in December, there was no violence. And plus, at the end of the day, what stake do American working families have in the United States meddling in internal affairs in Venezuela?
Well, I don't think it's a question of the United States meddling in internal affairs in Venezuela. It's just that it's a total disaster. Like, they don't have toilet paper in parts of the country. People are starving in what was pretty recently in my lifetime. I visited it as a kid. A rich country, a country making progress toward first world status, and now it's a disaster with one of the highest crime rates in the world. Like, the Chavez and Maduro people did that. Why not just say that out loud? Why make excuses for them?
Well, again, like I said, everyone in the government acknowledges that things like crime are too high and reforms are needed. That was something that was mentioned by Chavez before he died and is still mentioned by Nicolas Maduro. But in terms of economics, the sanctions that the United States has put on Venezuela and the hoarding done by multinational corporations in Venezuela certainly doesn't help the situation.
Okay, but that's not the real problem. I mean, look, the Supreme Court shut down the Congress in Venezuela. If you believe in democracy and you think people ought to have some say in their government, if the government's shutting down the Congress, I mean, that's authoritarian. And again, as an American, why would you make excuses for that? I mean, there's no like, you're not Venezuelan. You don't have to pretend that this is going well. It's a total disaster. Why not just say so?
I'm Calvin Phillips with Campus Reform. Today we're at UC Santa Cruz talking to students about their opinions on President Trump's role in ending the Korean conflict and if they think he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Let's see what they have to say. Or some of Trump's supporters have said that President Obama won the Nobel Prize in 2009 and they think President Trump has done more, and so he deserves the award for the global peace that's been brought about as a result of the seeming end of the conflict. Do you think there's any validity to that claim?
No. That's all I gotta say about that.
Do you think he deserves the award?
Hell no, that's a joke.
Okay.
Like, what has he done for peace?
Okay.
Yeah, nothing.
No. I feel like he just thinks that he deserves many awards, and that's just stupid. I think that's crap.
I don't really think so.
I don't know, it's just too good of a prize for him to have credit for.
Do you feel like President Obama deserved the award when he got it in 2009?
Yes.
And what did he do to deserve it?
Was it for his education, push on education, or was it for the Obamacare?
Do you think President Obama deserved it?
I think so. He did some good. He really did a lot of good work. Like, it gets undermined and stuff. But
what kind of diplomatic stuff comes to mind when you think of him winning the award?
Well, there's much to talk about. Give me some examples, Bob. Nothing pops up in my head right now.
Obama? I don't know. I mean, I'm not even sure what he did to get the award. Okay. Like, to be honest. Like,
do you think President Obama deserved the award when he won?
Yeah, he does. I feel like he actually wanted to make change instead of just sitting around.
Like, what changed in your mind?
I don't know. I have to look at that more.
I would be really frustrated if he got a Nobel Peace Prize. Okay. I feel like Obama was a really great diplomat, and Trump has really staked a career on not doing that.
Got it. And what do you think Obama did to deserve it in 2009?
I mean, I'm forgetting exactly what the political events were at the time. I was in high school back then, and so, but
I think if Obama won it, why wouldn't he win it, right? Because I don't know why Obama won it. Even, I like Obama, but I don't think there's any real legitimate reason why he should have won it.
Look, do you think the tough talk worked? He talked tough, and then within a year of his presidency, the Korean War is over.
Not a lot of people like getting talked to like that,
It seemed to work, though. I mean, the conflict ended.
I don't know. So we have no idea what they're thinking, like, to be honest.
Do you think that strong rhetoric played any role in North Korea coming to the table and denuclearizing?
I wouldn't say so. Oh, I think that for him to take credit is really just posturing on his part.
Tom, it looks like filmmaker Michael Moore is also jumping on the Fuck Team America bandwagon. Protesting is not enough. We must take radical action against the fascists in our own country. Bring it down. Bring it all down.
I do this joke about the way people need to justify their cell phone. I need to have it with me because people are so important.
Right.
You know, I said, well, they don't seem very important the way you scroll through them like a gay French king. You know, just where you can kind of feel like an opinion. And they thought, what do you mean gay? What are you talking about gay? What are you saying gay? What are you doing? What do you mean? You know? And I thought, are you kidding me? I mean, we can't even.
Last week drew the wrath of the liberal website Media Matters, who said that their jalapeno flag cover was the sort of stereotype that ignores Latinos as a multifaceted community and relegates them to chili pepper consuming constituents. Hey, Media Matters, can I say one thing to you? Shut the fuck up. Look at this insane headline. College president forced to apologize after saying all lives matter. You know what happened? A college president sent out an email in support of the protesters in Ferguson, but said all lives matter instead of Black Lives Matter. And then had to apologize? I'm sorry, I meant Black lives. Fuck all lives.
All I know is that you've changed. Ever since you joined this PC thing, you just bully people and wait for people to say anything improper so that you can jump down their throats for whatever words he or she used.
He or she is an agenderphobic microaggression, Sharon. You are a bigot.
I said, what is your ownership in this? And he said, well, I can't take ownership for all of it.
Right.
But then he proceeded to take ownership for none of it. You're not a total victim in this. You know the difference between right and wrong.
Now, let me tell you something. None of Trump is American. All of his family, all of his wives, everything of him is immigration. His wife is from the Czech Republic. Is he trying to kick her out?
No, of course not.
His parents aren't American, trying to kick them out? His children, they aren't fully American. They plan to kick him out?
Pretty sure that all these people moved here legally, though.
Okay, so you're saying that just because...
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows, only time.
That's not violence. Where do you draw the line?
Damage against property is not violence.
Where
I'm hearing how you're able to represent the ideology you were taught. And it's not that interesting because I don't know anything about you. I could replace you with someone else who thinks the same way. And that means you're not here. That's what it means. It's not pleasant. So you're not integrating the specifics of your personal experience with what you've been taught to synthesize something that's genuine and surprising and engaging in a narrative sense as a consequence. And that's the pathology of ideological possession. It's not good. And it's not good that I know where you stand on things. Once I know a few things, it's like, why have a conversation? I already know where you stand on things.
I bet you don't know where I stand on all things.
I would hope that was true.
Okay, let's talk about transgender issues. That's fun. What do you think I think about transgender issues?
I suspect that you think that gender expression, gender identity are fundamentally social constructs, but I could be wrong.
No, I believe that there are definitely some biological differences between the sexes. We've observed them. I do believe that gender is a hugely powerful social structure that we've built on top of that it is largely, but not entirely, socially constructed. I think when you look back through the history, biological differences have consistently shrunk, like we were talking in the 18th...
They haven't in Scandinavia, they've magnified.
Okay, but we were talking in the 18th...
That's actually an important exception because Scandinavia has gone farther than any other area, the Scandinavian countries, in establishing egalitarian social policy. And the differences in interest and career choice and personality between men and women have grown as a consequence, not shrunk, which is exactly the opposite of what the social constructionists predict.
But also just suggests that they're malleable, actually, rather than fixed.
Well, of course they're malleable. No one would ever suggest otherwise.
Right. So that's what I mean. So I think
they're
it's
not malleable in the direction that the social constructionists presume. As you flatten out the sociological landscape, you maximize the biological differences. No one saw that coming. And you might think, well, it's a handful of right-wing scientists who are pushing that. It's like, no, it's not. It's mainstream psychology, and there aren't any radical right-wingers in mainstream psychology. And everyone who discovered that was absolutely shocked by it. And these papers have been cited by thousands of people, and they have tens of thousands of subjects, and they've been done on virtually national level samples, cross-culturally.
I think it begins when the brain, when there's like an electrical impulse to the brain.
What about a heartbeat?
No. I think when the heartbeat sends the electrical impulse to the brain.
So heartbeat is not life.
Not in my opinion.
As long as it's still a fetus.
Well, when does it stop being a fetus?
When it's born.
When does life begin?
It begins when a woman decides she's gonna go for it, because her life is on the line doing it.
What about a heartbeat?
If the woman wasn't there, the pregnancy wouldn't be there. And if the woman's gone, you don't got no pregnancy, right?
And without the man, you wouldn't have a pregnancy either.
I know, you guys should limit your sperm production.
Because as far as we're concerned, as men, we go plus size, down to skinny is fine with us. And a doctor would probably say plus size is a bit rich. So we're actually nicer than doctors when it comes to standards. But women are the ones who shit on you if your purse isn't Hermes, and women are the ones who buy these fashion magazines and insist on women that are kind of gross. They're so skinny they look like 12-year-old boys. Women and gays have gotten together and created this beauty standard that we weren't consulted on.
Yeah, I wasn't consulted either.
That's a good one. Well, I just feel like I don't understand why men get blamed for these unattainable beauty standards when we're fucking pigs. In fact, I know guys.
I don't blame individual men. I blame the system.
But the system is run by females and gays. The beauty fashion industry.
Yeah.
We don't have jocks. I did a sketch on this called "If Dudes Ran Fashion." You don't have sports fans defining outfits.
No.
Or we just say high heel jeans, high heel shoes, cut off jeans, fucking a sweatshirt where you can see your tits, and we'd be good.
Yeah.
We've got so much to tackle here today, and it's going incredibly well.
All of our best debates are always about policy, and it should be about policy that affects women specifically. The Romney campaign wants to talk about women and the economy. The women in this country still make 77 cents on the dollar for what men make. So if women don't make less than men?
Actually, if you start looking at the numbers, Rachel, there are lots of reasons for that.
Wait. No, wait.
Well,
don't tell me the reasons are. Do women make less than men for doing the same work?
No, because...
Wow. Okay.
Well, for example, men work an average of 44 hours a week. Women work 41 hours a week. Men go into professions like engineering, science, and math that earn more. Women want more flex in their professions.
Listen, this is not a math is hard.
No. Yes, it is, actually.
No, it isn't.
Well, you have to
listen.
All
right, let Rachel frame it, though, the way you
right now,
laid it out.
women are making 77 cents on the dollar for what men are making.
But that's not true. If so,
let Rachel make her point.
Every greedy businessman in America would hire only women, save 25%, and be hugely profitable.
I feel like this is actually, I mean, it's weird that you're interrupting me and not letting me make my point, because we get along so well, so let me make my point.
I will.
But it is important, I think, the interruption is important, I think, because now we know, at least from both of your perspective, that women are not faring worse than men in the economy, that women aren't getting paid less for equal work. I think that's a serious basis, a difference in factual understanding of the world. But given that some of us believe that women are getting paid less than men for doing the same work, there is something called the Fair Pay Act. There was a court ruling that said the statute of limitations, if you're getting paid less than a man, if you're subject to discrimination, starts before you know that discrimination is happening, effectively cutting off your recourse to the courts. You didn't know you were being discriminated against, you can't go. The first law passed by this administration is the Fair Pay Act, to remedy that court ruling. The Mitt Romney campaign put you out as a surrogate to shore up people's feelings about this issue after they could not say whether or not Mitt Romney would have signed that bill. You're supposed to make us feel better about it. You voted against the Fair Pay Act. It's not about whether or not you have a female surrogate. It's about policy and whether or not you want to fix some of the structural discrimination that women really do face that Republicans don't believe is happening.
It's policy, is the argument.
It's policy, and I love how passionate you are. I wish you were as right about what you're saying as you are passionate about it. I really do.
That's
For
really
example,
condescending.
no.
I mean, this is a stylistic issue.
I'll tell you what.
My passion on this issue
Here's a fact.
is actually me making
Can
a
I share
factual
one
argument on it.
May I-
Alex,
May I share one fact with you? When you look at, for example, single women working in America today between the ages of, I think, 40 and 64, who makes more, men or women, on average? Men make $40,000 a year. Women make $47,000. When you take out the marriage factor, look at some economics. My point here is that we're manufacturing a political crisis to get away from what this election really wants to be about.
Some questions are just offensive to ask. You know, for instance, if you want to know if someone's Indian or Pakistani, it's okay to go, are you Indian or Pakistani? But it is always offensive to go, so which one are you? So what?
That's so racist.
Yeah.
Then why are you being racist?
No, like he just pointed out, I'm pointing out that racism exists, not being... You know, the jokes work a lot better if I don't have to explain them.
You have been racist, you've been offensive all night long, and you've been directing everything towards me this evening.
You've really picked a weird moment to do this, lady.
You've been directing things at me. It's like you want my approval or something.
Well, of course I want your approval. I'm a fucking comic. That's psychology 101. There's cameras on me. Have you not fucking noticed?
That's what you're doing. Is you're picking on the brown girl. Make the brown girl...
Oh, fucking bullshit. I didn't even go there. Get fucked. You brought that up. Matter of fact, if I'm being racist, because if you were a fucking white chick, I would have cut you a new one. Bollocks.
I'm sorry, you have been offensive, but dressing up as a Zulu with a bone for your nose.
Hang on, wait, I've got one for that. Hang on. She just threw me a lob. I'm ready for that, right? She said dressing up as a Zulu, that's racist. Wait, but what if you go into a fancy dress party as things beginning with Z? Why are you here? Yeah, get the fuck out, bollocks. You're the fucking racist. Bullshit. That's prejudging. Fuck off. I want my fucking tenner back. Yeah, tell your story walking. Get fucked.
Nazis use stars as well.
What does that even mean? Something about Nazis? Well, I reckon that might be an editing point.
Well, speaking of ethnicity, you made these comments after it was announced about this, or reported rather, about the grand jury. And Maxine Waters, as you know, has a lot to say about everyone and everything. And she targeted you most recently this past week on MSNBC and reacted to some comments that you made. Here's what she said.
Right. And what he's simply saying, you know, all of those black people are there, and they don't like Trump, and so he's not going to get a fair trial, and so they should take it out of that jurisdiction. It shouldn't be there to begin with. I don't like that, and I'm surprised that Alan Dershowitz is talking like that, and we will not stand for it. We will push back against that, because that is absolutely racist.
Obviously, there she's talking about the people that make up this grand jury in Washington, D.C. How do you respond to that?
Well, she doesn't know what she's talking about. First of all, I wasn't talking about the grand jury. I was talking about the petty jury. Grand jury doesn't matter. A grand jury will indict a ham sandwich if the prosecutor wants him to. So it doesn't matter where the grand jury is. But if there were to be an indictment, it would matter greatly where the trial was. Look, Maxine Waters should know better and does know better. She knows that every experienced lawyer, white, black, Asian, Latino, knows that when you're selecting a jury, factors like ethnicity, race, political affiliation matter. If I had said that race didn't matter, she'd have called me a racist. She throws around the term so loosely and so inappropriately, and it weakens her credibility, because by calling everybody a racist, by calling me a racist, when she calls real racists racists, nobody is going to believe her.
When you're teaching classes and a subject comes up that may be controversial, do you have like this overwhelming feeling that you're treading on dangerous ground?
Yes. Yeah. So
I taught Psych 101 at the University of Virginia, and I would take them into, sex differences, the origin of sexual orientation. I would even do race differences. Because there was a reasonable person standard, and I trusted my students and they trusted me, and we had a great time, and we covered a lot of stuff. But now, and then I moved to New York University in 2011 when my previous book, The Righteous Mind, came out. And it's not about UVA versus NYU. It's just about the changing time. Now, as I said, I have to teach to the most sensitive students. So I teach a course on business ethics, on professional responsibility, and we have a section on discrimination and employment law. It's important to cover. We have to cover it. MBA students have to know where the lines are, what the law is. And yeah, I'm kind of scared when I teach that because I'd like to get into all sorts of things. I'd like to get into what do numerical disparities mean? If there's a gender difference in the percentage of tech, but not in the percentage of non-tech employees in Silicon Valley, well, what does that mean? I would like to talk about that. But if a single student thinks that I am denying the existence of sexism, they could be offended by that. And in every bathroom at NYU, there's a sign telling them how to report me anonymously. And they put these up in 2016 in response to student requests. And it means that all professors are on notice that they can be reported anonymously at any moment.
By children.
Well, these are, I'm not going to call them children. I mean, my students are MBA students, but the undergrads, they're 17 to 21-year-olds for the undergrads. Yes, that's right.
Barely not children anymore.
That's right.
And there's an incentive to this what we were talking about before. There's this incentive that gives them attention, they get prestige, they get value from it, and this culture encourages these things.
That's right.
Mr. Friedman, referring to the statements that you made about women who advocate equal pay for equal work.
Gee, I thought I'd get a rise out of that sooner or later. Delighted to have it.
Yes, okay, I just would like to know if you're insinuating or perhaps, point blankly saying that women and other minorities' skills are inferior to those of those now holding those jobs, and that they need to go through a period where their skills need to be improved and therefore deserve to be paid less?
No, I don't think desert has anything to do with it. I'm not. First of all, I think desert is an impossible thing to decide. Who deserves what? Nobody deserves anything. Thank God we don't get what we deserve. But I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying a very different thing. I'm saying that the actual effect of requiring equal pay for equal work will be to harm women. If women's skills are higher than men's in a particular job and are recognized to be higher, the law does no good, because then they will be able to compete away and can get the same income. If their skills are less for whatever reason, maybe it isn't because it's their sex, maybe it's because they were out of the labor force, maybe it's for other reasons, and you say the only way you are able to hire them is by paying the same wage, then you're denying them the only weapon they have to fight with. If the unwillingness of the men to hire them is because the men are sexist, what's the phrase, racist, sexist pigs or whatever, if that's the only reason they want to hire them, nonetheless, you want to make it costly to them to exercise their prejudice. If you say to them, you have to pay the same wage no matter whether you hire women or men, then here's Mr. Sexist Pig. It doesn't cost him anything to hire men instead of women. However, if the women are free to compete and to say, well, now look, I'll offer my work for less, then he can only hire men if he bears a cost. If the women are really good as a man, then he's paying a price for discriminating. And what you are doing, not intentionally, but by misunderstanding, when you try to get equal pay for equal work laws, is what you are doing is reducing to zero the cost imposed on people who are discriminating for irrelevant reasons. And I would like to see a cost imposed on them. I'm on your side. But you're not.
Aside from the statistics, let's look at the notion that women, over the past 40 years, we are better educated, which means we have more financial freedom. We don't need a man like we may have needed a couple of decades ago. Do you think there's any truth to the argument that perhaps men feel sort of threatened because they no longer have that power or do you think there's any...
No, I think the average man's doing quite fine. They ignore most of the left feminist claptrap. They ignore people like Van, who are a very, very minority interest in our society. She's a self-declared anarchist, way, way on the extreme left of politics, representing perhaps 0.001% of thought in Australia. So she's safely ignored. The real issue for men is, can they keep up in the education system? At the moment, among university graduates leaving every year, 40% are male, 60% are female, a massive advance for women in this country. And when you look at the bottom of society, when you get away from Van's debate about women like her, because left feminism is essentially selfish. Can I speak, Andrew, without you being a participant? Are you a participant in this show or a host? Are you a professional host or a participant?
I'm trying to get to the bottom of the issue, but you try and insult the other guest.
Are you the host of this program, professional and cool? You should declare what you're doing at the beginning of the segment. You should declare your interest at the beginning of the segment. Because I can tell you the viewers had a gutful of you having a bet each way. Pretending you're a host, but really being a left-wing participant in the debate.
I am trying to get to the bottom of the issue. I have no doubt
that there are some... defending Van because I made a valid point.
Storm, please. I have no doubt that there are some legitimate concerns that men have about certain issues. Now, you talk about, you know, there being more graduates than women than men. Great. OK, legitimate concern. OK, we talk about the family law system, apparently these days, being skewed away from men in favour of women. Just Van, please. To create inequitable results.
And
these are worth exploring. But do you need to run down feminism in order to explore those issues?
No, you don't. I'm running down Van.
OK, well, why don't we try and keep away from personal attacks?
Can I defend myself, please, or is a man going to speak over me about me?
You're trying to speak over us as ever.
Yes, you are speaking over me, Mark. You're proving my point, Mark. You're not even letting me talk about myself. Now, I've known you for 20 years.
No, you haven't.
I met you when I was an undergraduate at the University of Wollongong.
Well,
you know for a fact I'm from a working class family from the suburbs of Sydney, and I write about that in my work all the time. You have to deal with the fact, Mark, that your position is the extremist one. I'm from the suburbs. I'm state school. I'm University of Wollongong, and I'm a feminist commentator who's pointed out the fact that women are discriminated against in this society. Let's talk about those trains and the need for safe carriages.
Van, can you just give us a moment?
On a train when you were a teenager? Because I was.
Excuse me, Van. I mean with respect to all of you, but I think personal attacks not very helpful at this stage.
Cool, the train about 20 years ago. The practicality on the 11:30
Mark,
train.
good on you with your personal attacks. Good on you, mate. Good to see you sticking to the topic again.
Well, I am sticking to the topic. It just shows how little you know about the practicalities of life in the suburbs, because the idea that
I don't live in a suburb. I live in a cloud, Mark.
No, you live in cloud cuckoo land, absolutely. So look, the point is that if you're on the 11:30 train out of the city and there's a women's only carriage and you're a bad bloke who wants to do damage, well, you go straight in. You're not going to respect the pink colour.
That's a really insightful comment, Mark. Good on you.
Thank you for giving us
If you ever call the train, get out of your limo, pal.
It's so nice to have a constructive debate. Thanks, Mark. Well, listen, Miranda, thank you. And thank you, Van. Thank you, Rory, for your insights, and thank you, Mark, for your entertainment.
Colour pink's going to protect you. Well, thanks for your objectivity, Andrew. Maybe next week you can go back to being a proper professional host instead of participant. If you want to participate, declare that at the start of the segment, and you might get a lot more respect from the viewers.
Once again,
all right, because basically what they're saying is that we are happier in our early adult life, and that women are more likely than men to fulfill their aspirations earlier related to material goods and family. That is true, wouldn't you say, Tracy? And a good thing. It takes men longer to figure out what they want to do in life.
Well, I just think this whole notion of basing your happiness on material goods is part of the problem, hence part of the reason that this thing was run by men in the first place. If there were women on the panel, they would, I mean, ask any woman if she would choose her car over her children, and she'd take the kids any day, whereas I would question a lot of men out there, quite frankly.
Tracy, I can't believe what I just heard you say.
There's a reason that women live longer, Mark. Let me tell you. It is because we are stronger and we are happier at the end of the day than most men, and that is factual, and you know it.
When men are married to women who scream like you, they just want to die sooner.
Go get your diapers changed.
Hello, my name is Jane. I'm social justice based. Agree with me or you'll be shamed.